Here is the Honda Civic 1999, also known as the Series EK. This one is a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, so I better really treat it really well. Otherwise he might get a bit angry with me. Obviously in this review, we'll go for a drive in this car, see how it goes, what it's like to live with, what I like about the car personally, what I really don't like about it, and then we'll get into other things. What motor does it have? Is it front wheel drive? Everything like that to do with it. And I'll show a bit of a brief history and then we'll go for a bit of a tour around the car. So it starts in 1972 with the first series Honda Civic. Now these Civics were a lot smaller in size, in weight, wheelbase, everything. This made for a really tight ride, and in the interior was really rough, and Honda knew this. Their slogan was, it will get you where you're going. And that it did. Made during the oil crisis and fuel crisis, this car produced amazing fuel economy, which is what really sold it. Because people then were looking for something really light and cheap and affordable to run. And that's exactly what Honda offered. The next generation, made a little later on, same idea. A short car, small, compact, and really good on fuel. But this time it's a bit more improved. The interior was updated and more modernized. It was a bit bigger, more luxurious, if you will, and just in general offered a more comfortable ride for the average person. That brings me on to Gen 3. The Gen 3 was starting to put a bit more power down. 76 horsepower, a lot more respectable, still had the same 4-cylinder that was shared across the board from Gen 1 and 2. And this time it was upgraded to a 1.3 litre motor with a EFI system as an option, but still came carbureted. After that was the Gen 4. This is where things started getting a bit more serious. Gen 4 was 1991. We start getting into a car that looks a little more like this. The car was EFI standard, double wishbone suspension, IRS at the back, manual, a 5-speed manual rather than a 4-speed, and more importantly, had the 1.5 litre engine with still the single cam. But what made it a lot better was that much better EFI system, making more respectable 85 horsepower. That gets me onto the EG Civic, also known as the Gen 5. That is the one before this. Now that EG Civic is what started the iconic VTEC. What VTEC is in the engine. It's not a turbo or anything. All it is the valves have different timing to each other, making it more efficient, more powerful, and more higher RPM. So they're iconic for that. That's what made Honda iconic for the higher RPM. The Gen 5 EG motors had the VTEC 1.6. This made 108 horsepower, and for a car that was sub 1,000 kilos, I'll put that in pounds here, that made it very, very fun to drive. It also started becoming a lot more aerodynamic, resembling more of a modern car, and Honda went from just an economy car, creating really cheap cars, to something that started really putting it on the face of the earth. That brings us on to this car one. This is a Series 6, also known as the EK. This was made from 1996 to 2000, and this is a generation that started the iconic series Type R. What Type R had to give you was the iconic motor, the K20. The Type R motor had twin overhead cam and a really high revving engine capable of 9,000 RPM, more from a tuner. Iconic for how it was able to be tuned. Chuck a turbo on that, you're easily pushing 350 horsepower without opening the motor. As standard, they made 200 horsepower, and the K20 was a 2-litre 4-cylinder. That is, at the time, one of the most impressive horsepower per litre numbers out of any car, let alone a small Japanese car. The Type R also had a body kit. The interior had a Momo steering wheel, leather shift knob that was also Momo, and red seats that were made out of suede. This Honda actually is not a Type R, but does come with those seats. It was a aftermarket add-on, but you will be seeing that soon. The Type R also featured things different to this car, like the Type R would have 15-inch alloy wheels rather than steelies. It also have more sportier suspension to help with the ride, sway bars, and in general was just better. It had a shorter shift kit in it and handled a lot better. And compared to this makes 105 horsepower. It was obviously pushing 200, and double the power in the same car is very impressive. You often see these cars getting around with that iconic K20 motor because of how easy it is to put in And how many cars just came out with the K20? It was unbelievable. Mine just has standard hubcap wheels. To be honest, I find them quite offensively disgusting, but that's okay. They look like they'll hit with a yuck stick. But other than that, you know, this one's been put LED lights in by my mate. And this is the non-facelift one, so it's got the less aggressive front bumper. But it's all right, you know. It's a very casual, calm car, flies dead under the radar. And it's one of those rare hatches with 2 doors, which I quite like. I like the look of the 2-door hatch. 16 in the front, that's a 1.6 motor, as I explained earlier. That goes through to the front wheels here, through a 5-speed manual in this case. This one is option with the 5-speed manual. Not a fantastic gearbox, not much feel, but you know what? A manual's a manual. Then it goes through these wheels. These are very skinny, as you can see, but it also has double wishbone suspension at the front, disc brakes on all 4 corners, which is extremely rare on this year's car. This is a 1998 and it has disc brakes all 4 corners, and it's a sub 1,000 kilo budget car. Model being the GLI, it has power windows, as you can see. The disc brakes on the rear, which is something a lot of people switch over when they do the K20. They put the disc brake version on the back. And then some other basic things like an aircon and a nicer radio and stuff like that. But the GLI, these ones are really hard to come by now because everyone wants them for those disc brakes and the electric windows. And it also comes with a tacho. So like I said, part of that GLI means you get the RPM gauge, which is 6,800 RPM redline. And then, yeah, of course, the electric windows, which is a great feature. Makes it a lot more modern feeling. Obviously, the outside of this car is nothing special. You can see this one's seen better days. A lot of these red older cars, they just suffer from heat burn and sunstroke really bad. You know, it ends up peeling the paint really badly, as you can see. But realistically, as you can tell, just because the paint's burning, not a hint of rust anywhere. And that's because these cars, they're built to last. Obviously you can see this one had electric mirrors, which is a great feature and obviously still works because of Honda. Along top of that, roof has clearly seen better days. Again, it's just the case with these older red cars, you know, but it's all right. Everything's basic, everything works. It's like a little go-kart. And I think that's why people just love them. They're so simple, they're so easy. Everything's just basic. Depending on where you're from, you may or not know this, but this is summer, dead in the middle of summer in Melbourne, and it's currently 12 degrees outside. Just thought I'd mention that. Beautiful, but typical of Melbourne. It brings me on to the interior of this car. As you open the door, you'll be greeted by the most basic door trim you've ever seen. It has its 2 window switches because this is a coupe. If you refuse to give your passenger air, you can do that. And you know what? The driver's one is electric and automatic. How cool. After that, you're greeted by the locking of the doors. You can click that in case you're going through the great suburbs of Melbourne. After that, it's nothing much. You have this material which is like a soft touch, but don't get it wrong, it's very cheap, but it looks nice. And then you have this pattern here which looks like you're on a metro train in the northern suburbs. That was found along the front seats, but clearly these ones have been replaced with some Type R ones. Back you can see the metro train seats, as I was mentioning, that are style, and no cup holders for your passengers. No headrests either. Yeah, if you want to be entertained, there's a cigarette ashtray. Good luck lighting your dart though. But yeah, it's extremely basic here, but you know what? It does the job. You know, you've got your clock. This is to reset it. You know, and then the hour, the minute, all that. Very basic. Aftermarket radio, you'll find most of these cars are fitted with aftermarket radios because the standard ones suck. Above that, you have your demister. This, which sets it from here to here. Great feature, by the way. I wish more modern cars had that. I fucking love that. It's not for the window here, which is at the back there. This actually comes this way. So if you don't want to be hit in the face, you can just go above you, which I like. Following on, you have your 4-ways in case you fucking send it with your skinny tires into a ditch. Obviously, it's gauge cluster, which is basic as anything. Got your speed, which goes up to 220 kilometers. I'll give you a fucking high five if you ever go that fast. Your RPM, which red lines at 6,800, but this thing will comfortably rev to 7,500. And then your fuel, and then your coolant gauge, and yeah, these things aren't too bad. Very basic, very easy to read. Obviously it's all analog, so if you ever feel like selling this car and you want more than a couple of bucks, you can just rewind the kilometers and who's gonna know. Down here, same thing, you know, you got one of your air vents, the only one on this side. This button here controls how bright and how dark the lights are in the interior, because all this lights up. And then a switch, which I can only imagine was for nitrous. Down here is again the electric mirrors, as I spoke about earlier, which I think is pretty good for 97, especially for an economy like this. Again, here's your turbo on and off buttons. And down here is your little fuse box. On the door, obviously, you have your speaker just to the left here, and then the only cup holder, if you can call it that. As you can see, this car does not have any cup holders to speak of, which I find crazy. I don't know why they did that. But yeah, not a single cup holder. Here's your, obviously, your manual. Down here's your foot pegs. Super light, everything feels great to touch. Heaps of engagement, very mechanical, which I quite like personally. I mentioned earlier, this thing does have the Type R seats, which is how they look. Extremely well bolstered, takes up my entire hand, and it's like a really nice suede material with the red stitching to match the red in the middle, which I find really good. Works great when you're sending this car's 14-inch tires around these roads in Melbourne. Yeah, you really feel it. It makes you very more confidence inspired until you hit a tree, that is. Other than that, another reason why I love these cars, look how basic this is. Oh, you want the AC on? Yeah, bam, easy as. Oh, you don't want it on? Oh, you want the air on the window or whatever? Easy, easy, easy. I see Teslas and Honda and Audis and all those new cars. You gotta click fucking an iPad screen, put in what gender you prefer and all this and that just to open the glove box, for example. I love how basic this is. This is what sells me to old cars. So here is your ashtray. What would be a cigarette lighter? This guy's turned it into a charger, which I guess everyone's done now. Bit of storage here for your PTV and your headphones. Bit more storage here, not exactly sure what you would use this for, to be quite honest. And then obviously, mechanical handbrake. Stick up here, if you feel like having lunch on your work break, you can chuck it here. Got a really small glove box, and then again, same thing here, a little holder there, and another thing here, which you can't really fit much in. The boot. Ugh. Not much space, as you see it's a small car, but it's enough to fit your basic stuff. You've got your two other speakers here, and you might find in most of these older cars you'll have a big bass sagging the car on its tits. Nice Honda. Alright, onto the drive of the Honda Civic. Now, I'm only driving this car just to show you guys because I'm extremely familiar with this car. Like I've said, this is my mate's car, not my personal car, and I've had a lot of hours in this car, and I find it handles a lot like the 323. Everything seems to come at you a bit quicker in an older shitter car like this. You're always more on edge, because if I slide out right now, I have no driver aid to help me. I have an airbag that's notorious for going off, and that's as far as it goes. And on a country road like this, I don't know who the fuck's coming around, so you're just always a bit more mindful. You see there's wild animals, and just any type of shit you just got to keep your eye out for. Because a car like this, if you hit anything, you will take the force, not the other person hitting you. As you can see, on a road like this, in conditions like this, it makes you always aware. A car like this, it already doesn't handle very well. So when you're going around corners like this, you just got to be careful of what's coming on. Be careful of tyres, and that's about all it's got in it. Because this car, it's not very friendly to country roads. It's underpowered, skinny wheels, they always are dying to lose traction. This car is said to have an LSD, but when it's wet and it's going around corners like this, nothing's going to help you. Put your foot down a bit. It just wants to lose it all the time. Remember, it's only 105 horsepower. Coming around these high corners, you know, you really have to be on it in this car, be up in the RPM. Before you know it, you'll be going backwards. But it handles good. Good response from the gearbox. roads.
I know.
I'll tell you what.
I feel it big time.
It's cuts on my ass as well. Feel it sliding.
Yes, I don't like it.
Why?
Alright, fuck off. Yeah, you fucking cunt. Alright, here we've got Max the Spaz. Part 1, fanging the Civic. There's the fucking beast. That's a quality fang by the Civic and Max the Spaz.
Yeah. Now I've got the 0 to 100, I'll do 3 runs. I'll have a timer on the screen. This is just rolling into it. Here's another 0 to 100, launching at this time with a moderate launch. Obviously the conditions aren't ideal. Now that brings me on to what I don't exactly like about this car. Starts off basic. As you can see, this car is really small and that makes it extremely tight there. As you can see, this is a 2-door car, but in those rear seats, nothing. You can fit a mate or 2 in there, but expect a really, really tight fit. Another thing, these wheels and tires, my hand's bigger. That makes it around corners like this in the country roads of Greater Melbourne really, really sketchy. And without any traction control, ABS or anything, it makes for a really scary ride, and you might think twice about giving your keys to someone with not much driving experience. Along with the tires, this comes in the same area, suspension. Now, as you can see, the body roll is crazy. It does move a lot on the road, which does make it comfortable, but I kind of find I become car sick almost because of the way it just sways. It's like you're seasick, car sick. It's just a lot of motion happening, and this suspension is very soft. So if you're going around a corner hard and you try and flick it back in, prepare yourself for the wobbles because it's crazy. That brings me on to the last thing I don't like. Now this one's last because I don't know if I like it or I don't like it. That's the engine. This engine is iconic. It's a D16. This is a single overhead cam, 16 valve motor that puts out 88 kilowatts, which is about 105 horsepower, and it's only a 1.6. Now that's pretty damn good, and it is a responsive motor, but it's also very old technology. These single cam motors can be found as well back as generation 4, and it is an old style motor. They used to be carbureted, now it's EFI, but still, it's really slow, really inefficient. The owner told me he usually gets fuel economy averages of around the 10 litre mark. That's crazy for a 4-cylinder that weighs sub 1,000 kilos. Now I know I just said I don't like the engine bay and the engine itself because, you know, it's small and inefficient and old, but that gives you so much ability to learn on these cars. As you can see, everything is so accessible. Everything's right there. There's nothing hidden away. There's no plastic bullshit. Nothing's overcomplicated. It's just simple, easy, and if you want to learn, damn, this has to be one of the best cars to do so. It doesn't help that parts, they're cheap as shit, and these were mass-produced cars worldwide. You will find a part. Another thing I like about this, because of all the room in this car, and the K20 was also made in this exact car, it is so easy to find subframes and swap out the motors for a K20. And just like that, you've got 200 horsepower on a stock block without a turbo. Heaps of potential there. And people love seeing K20s. People K20 turbo it, all-wheel drive convert it. It's so easy. Anyone can do it. It's cheap as shit. The motors are cheap. So it allows you to change motors as you want. People put V8s in this. The reason you see these everywhere is because they just don't die. And even if they do, a new D16 is like 300 bucks. It's not even efficient to change the timing belt on it. Just let it die, and when it does, put another one in. It'll be happy as. I believe everyone should own a beta car, and obviously you've seen my 323 review. That's another beta car that I'll be making more videos on. And I just love these. I think beta cars are the way to go, especially on your P plates. P plates in Victoria is something you have when you're 18 to 22, or when your first 4 years of driving. It just lets other drivers know that you're still in the beginning phases. But this car, perfect. They don't depreciate, they actually appreciate, but we'll get into that soon. That brings me on to the price of one of these things. Like I said, they're a great car to own, they're cheap, and they're just fun. But when I mean cheap, this is what I mean. This is a manual variant. But if you want an automatic one, just to drive around to the shops and back and not really worry, $2,000 to $4,000 in the Australian market, right? If you want like a $2,000 one, you might be looking without a roadworthy, no rego on it. You know, it might be a bit rough around the edges, but it'll still be alright. That'll be $2,000, probably have like 300,000 Ks. $4,000, you're looking at a better one. Now when it comes to the manual variant, which is what I have here, these things in the current market with COVID and all that shit, it's kind of like $6,000 listed price. But for what you're getting, $6,000, it's a lot of car for price. And it might be old and it might be a bit slightly outdated, but once you drive one of these, you realize why people love them, and they're everywhere. And there'll be, if you're buying a $6,000 Honda compared to a $6,000 German car, you'll figure after 5 years of ownership, one would have cost you nothing to own. The German car would have ended up costing you like $10,000 to own. Another thing, these cars, you could own this for, say you pay $6,000, probably own it for 5 years and sell it for more. My friend bought this about 3-4 years ago for 2,000 bucks. And now it's easily worth 6K. That's a 3 times on his potential investment, if you will, on a car he just drives around and has fun with. Alright, that's the Honda EK Civic. As you can see, great drive, fun to drive, especially on a country road like this. You can really make the most of a car like this. It's lightweight, it's fun, it's not going to get you in trouble, and it's just an enjoyable car. Hopefully you'll see more cars coming up soon. I love these roads. I plan on doing more reviews on these roads, so if you've got any inputs, let me know. Thank you. Right there.